Welcome to this explainer. We're diving straight into the trajectory of European anti-Semitism, starting from the high-level theories all the way down to some truly incredible stories of human survival. We're not just looking at broad strokes here. We're using direct evidence, historical pamphlets, and modern research to see how huge, sweeping ideologies practically forced everyday people into absolute miracles of ingenuity.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We're looking at 4 key areas: the Jewish state proposed, sowing seeds of hate, hidden children in Poland, and finally, the power of memory. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Jewish State Proposed, looking at Theodor Herzl's 1896 warning. So, our story actually kicks off with a 19th century pamphlet, Der Judenstaat, by Theodor Herzl. He's asking a pretty massive question: would Jews ever just be left in peace in Europe? His fundamental warning was that after centuries of restrictions and pogroms, the Jewish question was stubbornly following them wherever they lived in large numbers. Integration just wasn't working. He argued that packing up and moving to so-called safe havens, well, that just sparks new waves of persecution. He practically predicted the tragedies of the 20th century, basically saying immigration is totally futile without actual sovereign rights.
Now, to solve this, Herzl weighed 2 potential options for an independent state. First, Argentina, mainly because they had super welcoming immigration laws at the time. And second, Palestine, the historic homeland. But here's the absolute kicker. He warned against a mistaken principle of a gradual infiltration of Jews. He realized that slowly moving in without sovereign rights, it was a recipe for disaster because native populations would inevitably start to feel threatened. And as historians point out today, that was an unbelievably accurate prediction of the tensions we'd see in Mandatory Palestine by the 1930s.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, Sowing Seeds of Hate, focusing on institutional radicalization. Right, let's fast forward a bit. After World War I, Romania gained a lot of territory, which suddenly meant a massive increase in its Jewish minority. And that sudden demographic shift acted like a match to a powder keg. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, right-wing fascist political parties completely exploded onto the scene. Groups like the National Christian Defense League and the Iron Guard. And their fiercely anti-Semitic ideologies didn't just stay in the political arena. They literally seeped into the theology of the Romanian Orthodox Church, setting the stage for the Holocaust in the 1940s.
What's really fascinating here is the stark contrast in religious thought. For basically a millennium, the Romanian Orthodox Church stuck to this patristic tradition of peaceful separation, meaning, sure, there are theological differences, but the goal is peaceful coexistence and eventually being unified in God's love. But then, during the interwar period, that gets completely thrown out the window, replaced by an exclusivist theological hate. Why the massive shift? Well, Orthodox clerics and theologians were studying abroad in places like Austria and Germany. They soaked up these deep-seated fascist ideologies and brought them right back home, twisting their theology to actively endorse marginalizing their Jewish neighbors. Now, as we pivot from these big macro-historical ideologies, modern historical research really marks a shift. We're stepping away from the theories of politicians and zooming way in to analyze the incredibly raw human stories of survival that scholars are documenting today. Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, Hidden Children in Poland. This is survival on the micro level. So picture Nazi-occupied Poland. It's a uniquely terrifying environment where hiding Jews literally meant the death penalty. In the middle of this, children were essentially constructing their own hidden worlds. Taking on false identities, they survived in 3 main ways: tucked away in Catholic convents, hidden deep inside private Polish homes, or, wildly enough, hiding right out in the open as street kids. And getting through a single day, it depended heavily on the tiniest nuances. We're talking flawless Polish without a hint of a Yiddish accent, their gender, even their physical looks. Girls, for instance, were much easier to hide in plain sight because there was no physical proof of religion. But Polish Catholic boys weren't circumcised, meaning it was incredibly risky for a Jewish boy to be discovered. Actually, some young boys were even disguised as girls just to survive. Across all these hiding spaces, you see this amazing recurring pattern: older children fiercely protecting the younger ones. Take Janina David's memoir, for example.
She was a Jewish girl hiding in a convent. One day, she spots some convent girls cornering this little copper-haired kid, aggressively demanding to know if her real name was Rivka or Sarah. Janina marches right over, uses her authority, and declares the girl's name is Franca. She pulls her away and literally threatens the bullies, saying if they ever ask about her name again, she'd personally beat you black and blue. I mean, talk about intense. It perfectly shows how kids formed their own underground protective networks when adults weren't around.
But all of this brings us to a really fascinating question. It's actually one of the biggest challenges for historians. How on earth do you uncover the stories of children whose entire survival depended on being completely invisible?
Well, the answer lies in memory sources. We're talking post-war testimonies, oral interviews, and memoirs. These are absolute goldmines because they give us direct access to the emotions and the day-to-day encounters that official wartime documents just completely ignore. I mean, Nazi archives are great for documenting policies, but they're never going to tell you about a child's paralyzing fear of a street bully or the sibling-like bonds they formed with the kids of their Polish rescuers. A really unbelievable example of this is the cigarette sellers of Three Crosses Square. This was a group of roughly 20 Jewish kids, many of whom had lost their entire families in the Warsaw Ghetto deportations. Their survival strategy? Posing as Polish Catholic street urchins and selling cigarettes directly to the German soldiers occupying the city. We literally only know about their intricate group dynamics through memoirs. They were led by a boy named Ignacy Milchberg, who went by the nickname Bull. And Bull commanded total respect. He broke up fights, kept everyone in line, and was even the main point of contact for the adult underground resistance. And these memory sources show just how heavily these kids relied on each other. Take the youngest member of their crew, a boy named Bolus. Bolus had somewhat darker features, which instantly made him a target. When Polish peddlers started harassing him, calling him a Jew, and shaking him down for money, the older kids knew he was in imminent danger. Out on those streets, being outed meant death for sure. So what do? This incredibly tight-knit group of street kids coordinates with the adult underground to get Bolus out of the square and hide him in a private home. They literally wove their own safety net because the adult world had completely failed them. Which leads us to our final section, Section 4, the power of memory and reconstructing the past. Now, historians know better than anyone that human memory can be a bit fallible. After decades, dates blur, details get fuzzy. So to counter that, researchers meticulously cross-reference these survivor testimonies with actual wartime archives. Things like the Ringelblum archive from inside the Warsaw Ghetto or Sentus orphanage records. In some cases, they even use the International Tracing Service. But here's the absolute wildest part. Because these kids were so good at hiding, historians often have to search these official archives using the child's false Catholic identity just to find out what happened to them after the war.
So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. If our greatest, most profound insights into historical survival, the nuanced encounters, the shifting ideologies, kids protecting each other in the shadows, if all of that comes from the fragile, aging memories of once traumatized children, how does that shape our understanding of history itself? It really reminds us that history isn't just a list of policies and dates. It's made up of millions of unrecorded, intensely human interactions. Thanks for hanging out for this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep exploring.